It's a great joy for me to be with you as I begin these next few months as your interim pastor here at St James. Thanks, Jeffrey, for that very warm welcome and for this opportunity to address you this morning. I've actually been joining your Sunday worship for some weeks now. I've been hugely impressed by all that I've seen, the way in which so many of you have been taking part, doing readings, leading prayers, presiding over proceedings. That wonderful music group. Thank you, Suzanne and colleagues, for all that you bring to our worship. And above all, the sheer flair that's enabled you to make these online meetings so genuinely worshipful, enabling us all to hear and respond to God despite these strange circumstances that we currently find ourselves in. I've also been hugely impressed by how efficiently you've been moving in the search to find a new rector for St James, to the extent the post's already been advertised. That's absolutely unprecedented in my experience as an interim. On moving things along so swiftly in this respect. I'm sure, and I sincerely hope, you're feeling bold and encouraged about the future to which God is calling you. And you'll also be relieved to know, I'm sure, that I operate firmly within a philosophy of things unbroken, not requiring to be fixed. So I'm traveling with you over our time together and offering whatever I can in support of your worship and your search for that new rector. Let me move on to those readings that we've heard this morning. Two readings that take us, I think, straight to the heart of what a radically strange and countercultural thing our Christian faith is. They concern, though, a very practical issue. One of the commonest things that can happen to any of us in life is that people do things that hurt us in some way, maybe physically, maybe through unkindness, maybe through the things that are said about us to others, diminishing us in the eyes of other people. And a common response to that behaviour is to strike back, to trade blow for blow, to retaliate to unkindness with further unkindness, to speak ill of those who've spoken ill of us. And the mood of our times seems to be that it's very important that we stand up for ourselves in this kind of way. We don't let others get away with anything they might do to harm us. That's how you get on in life, the message goes. It's a jungle out there. You need to be strong to survive. And of course, what that kind of thinking rapidly leads to is escalation, to vicious circles of retaliation. The old Jewish principle of the lex talionis, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, was intended precisely to limit the possibility of such escalation. And that law, of course, is something that Jesus himself addressed and indeed overturned in the course of his teaching. But tough talk on both sides, it's long been recognized, simply means that the situation gets worse and worse. Is there a way out of these vicious cycles? Well, those readings that we heard this morning assure us that yes, there is, through that vital divine quality that we call forgiveness. Now, it's all very well and good to say that forgiveness is a good thing, but can it be too much of a good thing? Can it lead to us simply offering ourselves to be trampled on? From the reading we heard this morning from St Matthew's Gospel, it appears that some of the people in Jesus' time acknowledged that forgiveness was a good thing, but felt there should be limits to it. Peter says to Jesus, "How often should I forgive? As many as 7 times?" We can see the reasoning here, can't we? If someone punches me for no good reason, I might turn the other cheek, that's what Christians do, and forgive them. But suppose they then do it again, perhaps because they think they can get away with it, or perhaps to further try to provoke me, and then they do it again and again. At what point is it okay for me to think, well, enough's enough, and swipe them back. According to Matthew, Jesus' reply is, not 7 times, I tell you, but 77 times. And in another version of this story, Jesus says 70 times 7 times. So does it mean we should forgive someone 77 times or 490 times, but then really clobber them back on the 78th time or the 491st time? I think it's safe to say that this sort of keeping score isn't what Jesus has in mind. His words are intended to tell us that we should constantly forgive without keeping score. And it's important to remember here that forgiveness isn't just about the person being forgiven. If we feel wronged, it's very easy for us to brood on that wrong, to become resentful, hard done by, in ways that can blight our lives, poison our relationships. Forgiveness, therefore, is also about the person doing the forgiving. When we forgive someone, it allows us to draw a line, to move on with our lives. I'm sure Jesus was very well aware of that. So, forgiveness is one vital way of ending that vicious cycle of wrongdoing that I was talking about. Another way, though, is through seeing the bigger picture. And here St. Paul's words in his letter to the Romans are hugely significant. Paul talks about the way in which we judge others, and that kind of judgment so often lies behind our ill treatment of others, doesn't it? St. Paul writes, why do you pass judgment on your brother or sister? Or why do you despise your brother or sister? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of God. Each of us will be accountable to God. So here's a reminder of something bigger that lies behind our lives, something we should recognize, that God is the supreme judge, and God is able to judge fairly because God knows all things and can understand every aspect, every nuance of our lives, better even than we can ourselves. There's an old French proverb, tout comprendre, c'est tout pardonner. To understand all is to forgive all. Our own understanding is incomplete. It may be, but the God who knows everything will hold all of us to account for our actions and for our lack of actions if we fail to forgive others as Jesus told us to do. By saying that our readings today take part of our faith, but they also bring out in us those two things which are perhaps uniquely human, and which we might even say raise us towards God. To err is human, to forgive divine, says the old proverb. So in exercising our powers to forgive, we're emulating something that's characteristic of God himself. To be sure, seeing the ultimate big picture, the picture that makes sense of everything in this world, is something that's limited to God. But maybe if we try to see things in bigger and wider contexts, rather than simply in terms of ourselves, then perhaps by using those capacities which God has implanted in us, we can begin to emulate something of God. Forgiveness, seeing the bigger picture, these aren't things that our society today encourages us to do. More and more we're encouraged rather to take sides, to see others as culpable for things that affect us. And that's why I describe these great Christian virtues as countercultural. But forgiveness, seeing the big picture, not only lie at the heart of our faith, in terms of being how we should behave in our lives, they also enable us to draw closer to God, the God whom we praise and worship. So may that God continually inspire us to train our hearts and minds to enable us to grow in these ways. Amen.